So thank you very much for coming to this talk. This is more sort of a research talk. So we did make an effort to make an IBL, little tiny bit of IBL within, and we have a slide for implications for practice, but this is mainly sort of a summary of research that we have been conducting over the past 3 years with strong support from the Educational Advancement Foundation. We also have been working with support from the University of Michigan's undergraduate research opportunity, who has helped us provide, undergraduate work for a project. So Inah is not here, but she is one of the members, a collaborator in this research. Okay, so how we started this project. I'm very interested in teaching. I'm very interested in how faculty get to know what it takes to teach. So one of the things that we applied for in this grant is I was curious to see, now that we're having faculty who are teaching with this exciting method, what are the concerns that they have, and how can we use these to help people in the IBL Academy tailor some of these workshops for the needs for the faculty. So we have been gathering data over a couple of years on these. So my concern, so I'm really interested in how faculty learn to teach, or how, and inquiry-based learning is an interesting space for that, because it offers novel ways for approaching teaching. So it offers an interesting opportunity. So there are a couple of points of departure for us. So there is not much research on how faculty learn to teach, or that I know of. What we know more about is how TAs develop their approach to teaching, and this piece has talked about different stages that TAs go through. When they start teaching, they are very concerned about themselves, whether the students like them, whether they are going to say the right things. So it's a very centered concern. When they move on in their experience, they start thinking, oh, maybe I need to make sure that I manage all the little pieces, that the students do the homework, that I present on time, so they are more oriented towards managerial aspects. And then when they advance to when they're more advanced, they're more concerned about student learning. So they talk about this trajectory as a natural trajectory that people go through when they start teaching. So I was thinking about, do we experience the same in an environment like inquiry-based learning, where faculty want to teach these courses but they are new? Are these stages similar? The other question that we wanted to find out was, we have heard many times that inquiry-based learning, or the RL-MORE method, is really appropriate for upper division courses. And we have seen people applying these also to undergraduate courses for future teachers. So a natural question for us was, okay, let's see, are there really concerns that are different depending on the type of course that you're teaching? So those are the two main questions that drive the study. We have been collecting data over 3 years now. Our sample is it has 75 teachers, faculty from 30 states. I can show you the map if we have time at the end. We have a wide representation of faculty from different states. And we have stratified this sample by, as you can imagine, the level of familiarity that teachers self-report having with inquiry-based learning. When you sign up for our study, you say, I'm a novice, or a beginner, or an expert, or an advanced. So you self-select in one of these categories, and then we do our analysis. Depending on what you say, we ask you what is make that decision, and we take that into account. And the other the other way in which we stratify the samples is by the type of courses that faculty were teaching. So we have the stratification by level of expertise, and we conveniently divided that into two categories because it was easier for us: the beginner, novice, and the advanced expert. That's the two categories, and the three types of courses: lower division, upper division, or courses for future teachers. In all, we have gathered information from faculty over 171 courses over the 3-year period. You can sign up for 1 semester, 2 semesters, 3 semesters, and so on. The instruments that we have used are two main instruments. The main instrument is a biweekly log in which you log in and then you tell us what are the main concerns that you have had over the past 2 weeks. And we have some areas. I'm going to show you the areas that people have reported on. And then we also have interviews. So we have interviewed 30 faculty in the 3 years. Some faculty have been interviewed 3 times. Some faculty have been interviewed twice. And most of the faculty have been interviewed only once. We're not going to talk about the interviews today. We're only going to talk about the logs and only going to talk about some aspects of the concern. So these are the areas that we have been asking faculty to report on. We have done some work already on the logs that faculty have logged in, the concerns that they have logged in regarding assessment design and uses of quizzes, tests, and exams. We did a room presentation with that, only looking at years 1 and 2 because we hadn't finished collecting the data for year 3. We're planning on updating that information. And today we're going to concentrate only on small group work. The plan was actually do the analysis for all these aspects of inquiry-based learning, which include group work, large group discussion, having students do presentations. The truth is that the data is very rich, and we are starting developing our coding system and saying, no, I think we would do a better job if we only talk about small group work, how small group work is facilitated, what are the concerns that faculty have. So that's what we're going to be reporting on today. So 3 research questions that we have. This study at this stage is very descriptive. We have a little bit of some ideas about how all this fits together, but it's very descriptive. What are the challenges that faculty who are using inquiry-based learning face when they use small group work in their teaching? Are there differences depending on the level of familiarity that faculty report having with inquiry-based learning? So do faculty who are beginning teaching with the method express different concerns or more concerns of faculty who have more experience with the method? And are there differences between the concerns of faculty who teach for future teachers versus upper division courses versus lower division courses? So as you see, very descriptive questions. All right, so as you can imagine, you go in, you log your name, you say, well, the past 2 weeks, maybe I only had concerns with student presentations, so you may not log about all the areas. So we are only looking at the logs of people who reported some sort of concern with small group work. So that reduces our sample to 91 logs, but it corresponds to 38 faculty out of the 75 that we, so it's a little bit more than half of the faculty reported some sort of concerns with small group work over the 3-year period, and 46 courses out of the 171 courses that we have in the large sample. In the bottom table, you see the distribution of our faculty. So we have 27 faculty who disclose themselves as being beginner novices in the process, and 13 that are advanced experts. And regarding the course level, you see the distribution there. So it's, there is a little bit of a difference in distribution already. Anne is going to talk a little bit in a moment. He's going to be talking about the findings, but as you can imagine, we had a lot of interesting conversations about how we report this data, how we can compare the numbers across, because we have different teachers, different level of participation, different numbers of logs that people recorded every other week. So we have a number of ways, but you could be misleading in reporting any comparison. So we came up with a measure that allows us to make these comparisons across, creating some sort of what we call the average teacher in the study, and then weighted by all these different issues. So we're pretty confident about the way in which we're making the number for comparison, and we're happy to talk to you about that number at the end of the presentation. We have to spend a lot of time. So my plug here is to be assured that the numbers we're going to be presenting can be compared in spite of the differences that you see there. Okay? Okay, so for analysis, we identify themes after sampling across all the 12 areas of concern. So Anne created these random logs, and then we started looking, reading, okay, this person is talking about this concern is that. We coded all the phrases in the logs in which the teacher stated a clear concern. So things like, the students don't come to class. Yes, but what is the concern? So the concern is that not everybody pays attention. Like we were very intentional at looking things that really look like a concern, something that the faculty was worried about. We refined the coding system through many iterations, different codings, many meetings, hour-long meetings, 2-hour meetings, to try to get to some agreement about what were the main themes. And for the analysis of the small group work, we had pairs of coders, and we stopped refining our coding system when we reached 75% agreement among the coders. And then finally we sat down, okay, this is great. We're gonna discuss and agree over the rest, okay? Okay, so let's look at some of the themes that we have found. So, these are presented in order of frequency by the number of instructors who mentioned those, and by the number of codes that were assigned in general. So there is still, okay. So the first three, as you can see, are all about students, student performance, student engagement in the inquiry-based learning process, or student performance, student participation, student engagement with the IBL process, or student performance. So these are comments such as the students don't really like this thing, IBL. Instead, I mean, I'm doing this work group and they really sit back and they don't participate. I don't know what to do. I mean, they're really disengaged, or they are losing focus. That sort of comments fall into that category. Then we have a next group of codes, teacher knowledge, forming groups, and material preparation, which I think we have those boxes. Yeah, that's what I remember. I have these boxes so that we try to see the commonality. So it's very interesting for us that the most important topics are referring to students, how the students, the teachers see concerns with the students, how they're working. The next, the next three refer to teacher knowledge. So I really don't know what I'm doing wrong with my planning, or I don't know this new material that I'm preparing, I'm not sure what the activities should be. So that sort of concerns in teacher knowledge. Forming groups, I'm not sure about the diversity of the groups, some students don't participate at the same level, that sort of thing. And mathematics, that was one of the concerns that also came up. So this particular topic is very difficult for students, and I am still not figuring out how to teach it well for them. So that sort of fall into that category. So this is the IBL portion of these. So we want you to think about what themes do you predict would be more frequently mentioned if you, I mean, we're gonna divide the room, like this side of the room, why don't you take 1 minute to think and talk to your partner. What do you think would be the most frequently mentioned by faculty who are novice or starting versus faculty who are more advanced? You know, do you see some differences? On this side of the room, what do you predict would be differences if you're teaching future teachers, lower division courses, or upper division courses? So we're gonna time you for about a minute. So go. This one. Yep. No, just go fly through it. All right, so I'd like to hear from, this side of the table, a volunteer who would like to predict something you think we're gonna find in our data. Side. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
We thought that, much like your TA trajectory.
Microphone use.
We thought, much like the TA trajectory, the less experienced instructors would focus on things they're doing, and the more experienced would focus on sort of more subtle issues related to student learning.
All right.
Oh, so we picked like choosing groups would come up more frequently for the new.
Choosing groups would be the most important for beginning novices, like forming the groups. All right. Well, I think in the sake of time, so that's a good summary. How about this side of the room, about differences across the different courses?
Well, we weren't really sure. We focused a little bit on student participation. That sort of stood out to us, and we thought that might be a bigger concern in lower division courses and less of a concern in upper division courses. In future teacher courses, we were really on the fence because they vary a lot secondary, elementary, the type of institution, so we didn't really know.
All
But that
right.
was the one prediction we made.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so keep that thought in mind, because now Anne is going to tell us what we found in the data.
Great. So I'm going to speak in order of how these are appearing here in this table. So I'm going to first look at student participation, and I'm going to talk first about pieces that we pulled out from the log that's representative of what this theme is trying to capture, and then I'm going to break down the average percentage of concerns based on each of these separations that we have. So for student participation, one of the instructors said that it's very hard to get the students to focus on the problems, and it's also difficult to get some students to talk. So when we look at the average concern, or the percentage of the average, for example, if you look at the black, I don't know if this is going to point over there, but if you look at the black bar, this is the average teacher in general, regardless of their level of familiarity and the types of courses that they teach. So this is showing that 29% of the concerns for the average teacher are about student participation. So when we look at this, if you look between on the pink and the red, we have beginner novices versus the advanced experts. Beginner novices have more concerns for student participation than the advanced experts. And then similarly, when you look across the level of course, you see that there's kind of some similarities between the lower division and upper division, but that the future teachers have a bit more of the concerns there. What we noticed overall from this, and you'll see in the following slides, is that there was a high amount of concern overall for student participation among the teachers. So now looking at student engagement with IBL and student performance, so one of the quotes we have in there is, I already mentioned that the group simply refused to discover the mathematics. So now looking across the board here, we see that between beginner novices and advanced experts, the advanced experts had more concerns for student engagement in IBL in comparison to the beginner novices. And it's kind of almost similarly aligned along the type of course. Now looking at student performance, in a group, the weak students still struggle, and it shows while they're presenting with the rest of the group. So we capture this as a moment of performance amongst the small groups. And we see here that if you look along the lines of the type of course, the upper division courses had more concerns along the lines of student performance. So now moving on to teacher knowledge, the teacher knowledge pieces that we were looking at really had more of the emphasis on the teacher. So for example, this is, I'm not doing well managing groups. I'm trying to assign roles, but I don't enforce them. So interestingly, if you look at these numbers, between beginner novice and advanced experts, beginner novices have a bit more, 13% versus the 3% for the average, the advanced experts. But what was really interesting for all of us was looking at the future teacher courses and how much of a difference they had in comparison to lower division and upper division courses. So we'll go about, talk a little bit more about this in a couple of slides about why we think this might be true. Forming groups and material preparation. So this class had chosen its own groups, and the groups were not staying on task. So we were looking at these as pieces of how can a teacher adequately put groups together or conceptualize what the small group work would look like in their classroom to make sure that students were engaging in the process. And material preparation, I don't think my small group activities tend to go well. They're either too easy or too hard. And that was something that we saw a lot, and also in alignment with pacing of some students finishing earlier than others. So looking at the numbers for forming groups, we see here that the beginner novices have more concerns with forming groups than the advanced experts. And more interestingly, across the level of courses, you notice that the lower division has a much higher percentage of concerns for forming groups. And if you look at the future teachers, there was no concerns in this particular set of logs that we had for small group work. And once again, we'll talk about what we feel like those implications might be from that. And then finally, mathematics was the last piece. When having my students work to solve separable differential equations, I find that for too many, their struggles with basic algebra at times obscures the main idea. So looking at the numbers for this, we see that the advanced experts seem to have more concerns on the mathematics versus the beginner novices. And it's in a descending order for the level of course. Lower division courses have more concerns for mathematics, and then it goes to upper division, and then future teachers is at 1%. So we wanted to look at these themes as we had the boxes previously. of looking at those first three, which we kind of felt were more student-oriented ideas or concerns, the second grouping there, the blue, which were pieces that were in control of the teacher, and then the final one, which was just the mathematics, the discipline itself. And so what we did was we did a sum of those three for the first, for example, and you can see that for the beginner novices and the advanced experts, we have 55% and 58%, which is pretty even. But when you start looking at the teacher knowledge pieces and the mathematics piece, you can see that there's a difference. So if you look between the beginner novice and the advanced experts, there's about twice as many concerns for the beginner novice about these teacher knowledge aspects than the advanced experts. And then it flips when you go to the mathematics part, and you look at that theme, and we notice that there's about twice as many concerns for the advanced expert than for the beginner novice teacher. So similarly then, we wanted to look across at the types of courses, so we decided to pull three prominent pieces out for the types of courses. And so we chose to look at student performance, forming groups, and mathematics, because those held kind of the more interesting differences for us. So looking at student performance, as you can see, there's 4% for lower division and 2% for future teachers. So anyway, so you look at the upper division, there's 20% there, they're focused on student performance, which we thought was a really interesting finding. And then looking at the forming groups, the lower division had a higher percentage than upper division with 19%, but looking at future teachers, once again, there were no concerns there. So that was interesting to make that comparison between. And then also finally looking at the mathematics, there were twice as many concerns for lower division teachers for mathematics than there were for upper division teachers. So in summary, we saw that student participation in small group work is a major concern for all instructors, regardless of their familiarity and regardless of the level of course, but in this case, level of familiarity. And we noticed that as instructors become more familiar, so on that continuum of going from beginner novice to advanced expert, that there were fewer concerns about their knowledge regarding managing small group work, and that there were more concerns about the mathematical topics and the student engagement in the IBL process during small group work. So moving back to the piece with Nyquist and Sprague, we were talking about these three stages, right? And we wanted to know what evidence we had to support this trajectory. And we didn't see very many pieces that supported that initial stage, which is those concerns about the self, if the students like you, if they're hating you for this, and so on and so forth. And we believe that this is because of the research sample that we have. Most of the people that are in this particular study want to teach with IBL methods. They are excited about it. They may have been teaching for years already. So we don't think that that's necessarily the right fitting for this type of stage. But then when we look at the medium stage, which is concerns about management, and the advanced stage, which are concerns about the student learning, we feel like we do have evidence of that here. Whereas we see that as the level of familiarity increases, this cognitive overload, which we kind of put as the management aspect of, okay, we're preparing materials for everything, and we're thinking about how are we going to form the groups, how is a class going to be run today, and those pieces, that as you become more familiar with the IBL method, that kind of dies down a bit more, and more facets, for like example for mathematics or for student learning and engagement, that can then come to the forefront. So it alleviates that cognitive overload, is what we're calling the preparation, the material preparations and things like that. So then we came to try to think about a way that all this is connected. So we see that teacher knowledge and mathematics kind of play off of each other, and that in essence, those kind of then inform forming groups and material preparation, but that in some way, shape, or form, whether it's beginner, novice, or advanced expert, these three pieces play together, because ultimately, as you recall, the student participation, student engagement in IBL, and the student performance all were kind of equal across both of them. So there's something going on here that is funneling down to getting what we want with the student learning aspect. So now looking on towards the type of course. So instructors of upper division courses had more varied types of concerns regarding small group work than those of lower division and future teacher courses. Instructors for upper division courses seem to be reporting more concerns, and future teachers reported more concerns on teacher knowledge and had no concerns of forming groups. So why we see this. So students that are in courses for future teachers, based on previous work here last year, students in these types of courses use different resources than students in other mathematics courses. And so for that reason, they may be more familiar or expected to work in small groups. So that may be a reason why forming groups is not an issue for these instructors. And then they also engage in a different type of mathematics than courses that are taught in lower division and upper division. So it's mathematics for teaching. So maybe that's why there was not as many concerns for the mathematics. Now looking between lower division and upper division, The lower division courses have a more heterogeneous population, as we all know. So for that reason, forming groups might have been a challenge because you have more of a varied population. And then also generally, these lower division courses generally contain prerequisite knowledge for higher level courses. So for that reason, mathematics might have been a major concern in trying to fit in and get the required instruction into that course. And then finally, looking at upper division courses, they may have students that have presumably taken many math courses previous to getting to these courses. So for that reason, they're focused on student performance. And that might be a reason why the focus on student performance is much higher for upper division teachers. So implications for teaching, we feel that perhaps maybe then we can devote time to learn about designing group work. In order to perform well, groups do need that time to kind of go through these phases of struggle and strife and communication and output or non-output. But also to devote time to design group work activities and to be intentional in your design. So hoping to come in with some problems and hope that it works might work for some groups, but then some other groups might go through them very quickly, so being intentional in your design. And then also to be present during small group work. So present meaning sitting down and listening to what's going on inside of the small group work. How are they functioning together, and how can that then help you with your management in future small group activities that you decide to have. So we want to thank you very much for having us here. And thank you to Mr. Harry Lucas and the Educational Advancement Foundation and the University of Michigan's Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program for supporting Kyle LaFollette, who will be joining us this fall as a transfer student from Oakland Community College at University of Michigan. So we're very excited. So thank you very much. So now I think we're open to questions.
I'm Nina White from University of Michigan. I had a question. There was one slide you said you would talk about, and you didn't talk about it. There was a question of teacher knowledge among the 3 different course types, and the future teacher, the instructors of future teachers had this like massive bar, like 33% teacher knowledge, and this was all expressed within the logs of small group work. So I was just curious, can you comment on that?
The question is what we saw there, what the kinds of concerns, or why we think it's so large?
Yeah, why do you think it's so large? And maybe that has to do with what the types of concerns were that you saw.
This one here. Yeah.
So what was interesting for us, what we think is going on in there is that the concerns that are for faculty who are teaching future teachers, there may be less concern about mathematics in general, like the mathematics that they have to teach is necessary. I mean, it's something that you assume students already, quote unquote, know. However, how they deploy some of the resources in the classroom is going to be different for faculty. It's not the mathematics that you used to teach. It's a different kind of mathematics, and then how you organize the knowledge in order to do that teaching is what people are saying in these logs. I really don't know how to manage all this work with the students.
And also one of the pieces, so the teacher knowledge was a major theme, and we had subcodes underneath. And one of the pieces that came up enough to notice was that they had issues in trying to control themselves in providing hints or taking over. So when students were working in small group work and they were trying to come to some piece, then they would either talk about the control that they were having within themselves to not provide too many hints so that all of a sudden they get it. So that was a piece that was somewhere in there for that one as well. Annie, I think you have a question.
Hi, Annie Selden, New Mexico State. This clarification question. I was a little bit concerned about what you meant by mathematics, and as you had a quote, I think the faculty were concerned about the students' knowledge of mathematics. Is that right?
Yes.
And it didn't mean that the faculty were concerned about their own knowledge of mathematics. Is that right?
So I think we coded knowledge of mathematics here, but we did make a note when the teachers mentioned, I don't see how the students, I don't see my students understanding this particular topic, or understanding linear, what was one topic? some linearization or differentiation or something. It's very hard. Or for this, we're entering into a new topic that is new for the students. I don't know whether they're going to be understanding. Or things like, I was very surprised to see that this was harder for the students than what I anticipated. So that's the kinds of things that we coded within mathematics, but the main threshold for coding something in mathematics was when a specific topic was named. So topology or differentiation or limits. So people who said students may not understand reasoning, we didn't code that necessarily as mathematical. We're looking for specific mentions to mathematical topics.
But to be a bit more specific too, some of the subcodes that we had within that were mathematics, like what instructors see as difficulties for their students versus mathematics, what is difficult for the instructors themselves if they're explicit in their own.
But nobody said something like, I've got these really bright students and I don't know the mathematics. Because when you have pre-service elementary teachers, quite different, they sometimes lack confidence in their own mathematics. And that's a big issue, because if they can stand and deliver, they're more confident than if group work and it goes anywhere, and then they have to know more mathematics to help the groups. So everybody you studied was very confident in his or her mathematics. They didn't feel any problem.
Only when they reported on small group work. So that's one important thing that we need to have in mind. I mean, these are only concerns that people logged when they were talking about difficulties they had with facilitating small group work. We haven't analyzed things like student presentations, and my guess is that when we get to student presentations, we might get very many more about actually seeing students using mathematics and not using it correctly. So that's the caveat here. Yes?
Zoe Dye from Alma College. I'm just wondering if you guys were ever at a point concerned with your sample size, because I noticed the stratum with the future teachers only has a sample size of 9. Could that be contributing to the fact that, I mean, the data that the teacher knowledge side is 33% versus 13%?
Yes. However, you have to remember that there are 9 teachers, but they were logging over a number of logs. So you may be one of those 9 teachers, but maybe you provided information for us over 45 logs. Like you actually went into the website every week in the 3 years, or every other week in the 3 years, and at the end of the year, you had on your stock of logs, you may have 20. Right? So that's one of the things, that's one of the things that we are grappling with, how we present these numbers so that we can actually compare. Yes, it's 9 teachers, but some teachers may have logged over and over more than once.
Sandra Larson, University of Colorado Boulder. My question is about the student participation category. I'm wondering if you see any shift or difference between the novice and advanced instructors in terms of the kind of concern, and particularly a couple of the quotes you had to do with worrying about whether students would participate, and I could imagine that might shift over time to the nuances of the kind of participation, the nature, quality of student participation, as opposed to just will they talk?
Right. I think for this theme, and that's a great question. I mean, and obviously this was such a major concern for a lot of different instructors. For this theme, we had the most subcategories. For example, some of them were students becoming more autonomous, right, and like participating by inserting themselves in a different way, versus unequal participation versus diversity of students. So things like that. So we haven't looked at that fine-grainedness of it, but because of this first analysis that we've run, and we see that this is such the major theme here, that it could be something worthwhile to looking into in the future of how that definitely breaks down. Because we did start seeing, as the years progressed, some different pieces coming up that we didn't capture before. So that could be something that's nice to look between. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one last question, and if the next group wants to come up here and start getting their stuff up, one last question.
Mylan Sherman from Drake University. I know your study has focused on issues that teachers faced in terms of working with small groups. I'm wondering if you have any data that talked about effective strategies for dealing with some of the issues that were raised.
Yep. We have tons of data on strategies. We haven't analyzed that. My secret hope is that Kyle, the student who's helping us this summer, will take that as a project. Like we will actually look, because every log had an entry for concern and an entry for a solution that you have found. We know that people say, I have not found any solutions, please help. But we have seen some solutions. So our hope is that Kyle will take that on his research project as the end, as part of the working here. So, no. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's thank them again.